Here we go.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. It's getting nice and cold here.
I wish I could see that here, but it is like dropping into the low 70s once in a while. So that's always a welcome for me.
Yes, we are waking up at about 45 now,
Woo!
and I'd say the leaves are maybe a fifth or a fourth of the way, it's falling. So tis the season for sure. I'm really excited about the next 3 and 4 weeks. It's going to be really cool.
Awesome. So, yesterday, one of your old friends stopped into my office again, and I promised him that we would give him a shout out on the show. And yes, I said him because, yes, most of our listeners are women, but we do have enlightened male listeners out there as well. So Joe came in to the office yesterday and he said, make sure you say hi to Graciela. And I said, well, tomorrow is podcast day, so I will absolutely tell her that you say hello. And I said we would give him a shout out on the show. So here it is.
Slamma jamma. Very cool. Happy to hear it. I was just thinking about him the other day, actually. So I will tell you, Joe and I spent, I think it was 13 years working together in the legal field. So yeah, that's like a whole lifetime. The good years too, the 20s and 30s, the good ones.
The fun ones.
The fun ones, yeah. Definitely.
Oh,
I learned a lot from Joe. Like I always joke, like you see me for all my events and stuff, I'm always with a 3-ring binder. Joe's the one that started that. So for all of you that mock me for my 3-ring binder, just know that I mocked him for years. So yeah, that's how that goes.
Oh, well, and good morning to our regular listener, Pam. I'm actually using your mug again today, Pam. Because today is an extra special show. I am so excited and I feel like honored that someone he has some responsibility for the name of this show. But without further ado, we are bringing on Moses from Embue Cacao, our favorite cacao. And I'm going to say people every once in a while, like, give me other cacaos, like, you got to switch, you got to try this. And every time I'm disappointed. And I don't think anyone will ever be able to steer me away. So thank you for joining us this morning, Moses.
Yeah, it's my pleasure and good to hear.
I would love for you to just introduce yourself a little bit to our audience. Tell them, I want to know, like, your cacao story. How did this all start?
Yeah. So my name's Moses, and I'm the co-founder of Embue Cacao. My wife, Amba, and I founded it. It's actually 15 years ago this October, actually. And we started it after a couple of years after we had been in Costa Rica. We were at a fire circle festival there, and someone said, as one of the opening nights, it was a multi-night event, that we were going to do a cacao ceremony. And I was like, oh, chocolate, that sounds good. I like chocolate. Didn't think too much else of it. And so we sat around a fire, and someone made up a really thick drink of cacao, and I never really had it that way. And it felt like I was just effortlessly falling in love with everyone at the gathering, 40, 50 people, half of whom I didn't know. And it wasn't in the like, oh, I'm going to work to open my heart kind of way. It was just like heart wide open, really beautiful, really easeful. And so I realized there was obviously a lot more going on than chocolate as I knew it. And so that kicked off a couple of years of exploration with cacao and inner work. And the timing was really helpful for me, because one of the main lessons I was working with that time in my inner work was how to do inner processing in a more gentle and less impatient way. I was trying to move very quickly at that point in my life, and cacao has this really sweet way of just being like, there's nowhere to go. We're right here. You might be feeling things, thinking things, whatever, but So it lined up really well with, what I was needing, and also just the kind of ways that I was working with my inner landscape. And then a couple of years later, Amba and I decided that we wanted to share this with other people. So we started bringing some back, usually just in our backpacks from Guatemala down south, and sharing it, leading cacao ceremonies. And back then it was, you could Google cacao ceremony and there was absolutely nothing. And everyone looked at me really funny every time I said it, like, cow ceremony? What are you talking about? And so, yeah, it's been really fun watching the whole thing just explode over the last 15 years. Just more and more people, I think, resonating with the gentle, heart-centered energy, the accessibility. It's legal. It's a great introduction to plant medicines. It's something we can do on our own. We don't need to go to some big retreat to do it. So it's really versatile that way. And yeah, it's been great watching the whole thing take off and have our own evolutions at Embue as well.
And congratulations. I mean, how exciting. And I'm sure you hear stories, but probably those stories are just the tip of the iceberg on how your work has impacted so many other people's lives. I mean, aside from the fact of drinking cacao, whether it's every day or in ceremony, that in itself has a massive impact. But for us, it literally has launched a whole separate career for us because, I don't know if Julietta's ever told you our origin story, but I had a client come to I'm a photographer, and she came to a session and she said, I'll do this session with you, but first you have to drink this. And like everyone else, I was like, well, what is that? And is it psychedelic? Which is probably the question I answer the most nowadays is, is this psychedelic? Yeah. No, it's not psychedelic. So I thought, all right, well, here we go, bottoms up. And we had the most beautiful heart connection. We had such a great experience together. And that's what got me drinking cacao every morning. And it helped me develop my ritual. And long story short, I would, wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, do my ritual, and I would start emailing Julietta all these great ideas. And one day she finally said, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing at 5 o'clock in the morning that's giving you all these ideas all of a sudden? And I said, it's the magic of cacao. So how have you seen that magic show up in your business and as a result of your work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so many different kind of tracks over the many years. I mean, in my personal life, it's hard to separate out sometimes just cacao from other things, but I find over time, both in my own practice and with cacao, it's like the small, gentle daily shifts versus the big, major, kind of like life-changing things. I'm in my early 40s. I've got 4 kids. We've got a little homestead here in Vermont. So life is very busy and full. And my wife and I drink cacao every day. And I think it helps bring us back in the kind of like small adjustment way. And I think that's a really important piece of cacao, is the regular use can help provide those like daily reminders of being more in our heart, that life is a little bit more flexible than we might think in a given moment. And then I would say also on the business level of running Embue, there's definitely a sense that I have of being like, I'm not totally in charge of the thing. And I think that cacao is participating in it, and it's hard to pin down exactly, what that means or how that's played out, but it's, I guess in a way it's continuously worked. And I don't think that's solely because of things that I've done or Amba's done. I mean, obviously there's decisions we make and we work hard, etc. But it's kind of in some ways on a what I might call a magical level continued to work. And there were some months in the early years where I was like, I don't know if we're going to make enough sales this month, and all of a sudden just like magically they show up, and I don't know how or why. Not clearly anything that I've done that produced those results. So yeah, that's what I would say. It's a journey of just paying attention and being open to what comes through a lot of that. Yeah.
I love hearing that. Like, I'm sure cacao is playing a big hand in all of this. And I know that she wants to share her gifts with humanity. And I often say, the plants of the planet are trying to save us humans. We're doing our best to try and destroy ourselves. But, cacao, the psychedelics, but also, I see so many more people turning to herbalism and, natural healing methods, and just so many gifts that are out there from the plant life for humans. They are really doing their best to try and save us. And so I hope everybody opens up to that. We've mentioned quite a bit the spiritual aspect, and I know we're going to dive deeper into that. But I also find one of the ways for me to get what I call muggles, like the non-magical people, to consider bringing cacao into their life is by talking about the more scientific 3D benefits of consuming cacao. And can you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, and probably helpful just real quick on, cacao, what's different about that from chocolate, etc. Cacao is historically used only for the cacao tree in the chocolate world. So just a real quick, you have a tree, within 3 to 5 years, it starts producing fruit, like a Nerf football kind of pod, and all sorts of yellows and oranges and pinks. And inside that, you've got 30 to 50 seeds, and you've got fruit also around it. That's like a sweet tart pulp. So for, processing chocolate, etc., they would open the pod up when it's ripe. They're going to put the seeds and the fruit all together into a big fermentation system. In older times, it would have been just a little pit in the ground, banana leaves. A lot of the producers we work with will do these giant wooden boxes where they can manage it really well. And so they're going to ferment the cacao for anywhere from 6 to 10 days, depending on the varietal, the temperature, humidity, sugar levels in the pulp. But that's the first real kind of enzymatic transformation, chemical transformation of the raw cacao. It actually gets above raw temperatures in the fermentation process. So the kind of raw cacao thing is a little bit of a misnomer on a lot of fronts. So it ferments, and then once it's well fermented, like the origins we work with do these little cut tests, and they're checking the pile to see that you get a high percentage of the beans well fermented. And then they'll take them, they'll dry them out in the sun. So at that point you have cacao beans, they've been fermented, they're dried out, which brings moisture content down. So in our shop, that's the form that we get them in. They're dry. We've got these giant, 60, 70 kilo sacks of cacao beans into the shop. And the first thing we do is we'll sort them. So pull it out, the bad beans, moldy beans, broken, just kind of getting an eye on the whole process. And then we roast them. And the roasting is flavor development. So unroasted cacao tastes very different than roasted cacao. What we know of as chocolate flavor comes from the roasting primarily. It also kills off any bacteria that might be lingering from the fermentation process. So it's a kill step around mold, bacteria, mycotoxins, all of that. And then it makes removing the husk of the cacao bean a lot easier. So the next step after that is winnowing. So that you imagine like an almond, you've got the skin on it, and we want to remove that. It's kind of just like fiber, doesn't add to the flavor. So the winnower just cracks up the whole bean and then uses air to suction off the husk. Nibs come down. So at that stage, you'd have just pure cacao nibs like you could buy at the store, same thing. And then we refine the nibs up so that it reduces the micron size, kind of like with chocolate, or when you drink Embue, you don't notice any grittiness to it because we've ground it up. And the grinding process has a secondary function known as conching. So there's various acids that are in the cacao from the fermentation. Some are naturally occurring, some are just acetic acid fermentation. We want to drive some of those off to develop the flavor, so it aerates essentially over a couple days. And for us, that's after we pour it out of the machine, we either shave it up to make the flakes that we do, or we temper it into a 1 pound bar. In the chocolate world, or say to cocoa powder, they would take that pure cacao and they would defat it, usually including some chemical processing to change the pH, give it the right color. So they're removing about half of the cacao bean, the cacao butter, to get cocoa powder. When they're making chocolate, they're recombining often in different percentages, adding more cocoa butter, solids, fillers, etc. So for ceremonial cacao, what we're talking about is essentially the whole bean, and we process it as minimally as possible, but enough to make sure that it's, it's got the flavor, the health benefits, etc. And then to your question, what's the benefits? One of the things I love about cacao is it's because it's such a popular product. There's so much research that goes into it. It's not like certain plant medicines or psychedelics where it's hard to really get good information. Cacao is a very well studied thing, and it's actually constantly evolving our understanding of the benefits. Like I'll read new stuff that comes out about cognitive benefits like brain function. Some of the classic ones would be it's full of mood enhancing compounds, the anandamide, the PEA, serotonin precursors. So the kind of the feel good compounds. It's got lots of magnesium, which is a muscle relaxant. I think that's, one of the experiences a lot of people have in ceremony is just that kind of body relaxation. High in antioxidants, all sorts of stuff there around the cardiovascular benefits, pretty wide ranging in terms of antioxidant counts. It's one of the higher ones in cacao in terms of other antioxidant sources. And then the main, what I would call psychoactive compound in cacao, where it gets its name, is theobromine. Theobromine that's the Latin name of cacao is Theobroma cacao, food of the gods. And the theobromine in it is, it's a stimulant that's in the same like alkaloid class as caffeine, but it's more focused on the cardiovascular system than the nervous system. So caffeine stimulates the nervous system, theobromine stimulates blood flow. So a lot of the heart protective qualities come from that. It's good for the heart, it's good for circulation. And the theobromine is part of what I think gives it the kind of focus enhancing effects that we can benefit from in ceremony as well. So I would say those are the big ones. And it's just cool that there's always new stuff coming out, people studying various aspects of it. That kicked off the interest in dark chocolate for health is from a group off the coast of Panama known as the Cuna, and it's a small little island, and they were regularly consuming cacao. It would be a much more like a thinner version than what we do now, but about an ounce a day throughout the day. And that's where they notice very low incidence of heart conditions, no high blood pressure, and so they linked that back to the cacao consumption, and that kind of kicked off a lot of the eat dark chocolate, which I always find a little funny because it's like, they're trying to encourage people to go darker, but it's like, but there's still all the sugar and there's the fillers and the other things that kind of come with that, instead of just being like, eat cacao. Cacao is what's good for you.
One of the big questions that comes up like in the ceremony, because often we're holding them in the evening, and you were talking about the theobromine and caffeine. And so people are always worried, like, does this have caffeine? Is it going to keep me awake all night? Could you speak a little more in depth about that?
Yeah. So it has caffeine for sure. Anyone who says otherwise is, does not give you the full picture. I would say so generally for a daily dose, I would recommend around an ounce of cacao. A ceremony might be like 1.5 ounces to 2 ounces if you're doing something longer, but an ounce of cacao is going to have around 40 milligrams of caffeine. So somewhere around a cup of black tea. It's about 0.1 to 0.3% by weight is caffeine, and the theobromine is more like 1 to 2%, so 10 to 20 times more theobromine content per serving. So I would say both of those are stimulating, and generally in relation to a ceremony in the evening, I would either, go a little bit lower dose, because if you're doing 1.5 ounces, let's say to 2 ounces, it definitely will keep you up for 3 to 4 hours. So often I'll either go lower dose, do it a little bit earlier, or I've done plenty of ceremonies that are intended to go late. And then there's this interesting sweet spot I find with cacao where it can actually, it's almost, I at times I feel like it's adaptogenic in the, like, I can have cacao, then almost be like, oh, I want to go take a nap now. And I'm, it's like my body needs to rest, and it helps me kind of just get into that slow enough down zone that I can go sleep. And so, it's definitely stimulating. I wouldn't give someone like a full dose of cacao and then, wish them good night. There's companies that sell nighttime cocoa drinks for kids. And so there is kind of a sweet spot in there where it can help switch it over. And there's a cool dream zone too, I think, where dreams can be more vivid, or that it's kind of like that creative energy that you were talking about earlier, Graciela, around just like writing all the notes, and that kind of just like can move kind of into dream time as well.
Yeah. I always, when I introduce cacao, and now I host little how-to cacao classes and things like that. But one of the things that I always say is that cacao gives you what you're looking for. So it's very important to set your intention. So if you need focus and creativity, and you need it to sustain you throughout the day without having a big crash like you do with coffee and sugar, cacao is your girl, and if you want to drop into your heart center, cacao is your girl. And if you want to take the world's best nap, drink cacao, and people have a hard time like, wait a minute, I thought you said it was energizing. How could it also give you the best nap? And I'm like, I don't question the magic, man. I just know that, like, when I set my intention and I say, this is what I'm after, this is the support that I need. And sometimes even going into drinking cacao, I'm not quite sure what I need, but after I drink it, I'm like, okay, like you said, it slows me down long enough to really listen to my body and my brain and say, what do I really need right now? And sometimes it's, we have had multiple times where we've planned out a retreat in one day, or we have, I planned out a year-long coaching program and I banged it out in one day, and I credit my cacao strength for that. And then again, some days I'm just like, I just need to take a nap. Like, I just need to rest. That's really what my body needs. So I have two questions, actually. First one is, I would love for you to speak on why you keep your cacao pure. And like, there's this evolution happening where a ton of other companies are adding things to their cacao. And I'm not trying to trash them or anything like that, but I'm just curious as to why you keep yours pure. And then part B is, can we get a tour? Like, can I plan a retreat on your farm? I'm coming. How do we do this? Let's set it up.
So on the purity question, I've toyed around with ideas for a long time about adding things to our cacao, offering different options, adaptogenic mushrooms, cayenne, warming spices. There's kind of the sky's the limit in a way, and a lot of it's just a practical consideration. So the basic thing for me is that cacao in its pure form, as in not defatted, not over processed, is got the most benefits. It's still got all the healthy fats in it, which are really good for us. The cacao butter, it absorbs in the body better in its pure form than, say, cocoa powder, etc. So that's kind of the base that we're working with, is the pure cacao. And because people add so many different things to their mixes at home, it just seems way simpler to be like, all right, we're going to provide the base, and you add the things that you want to it. Whereas, there's a lot of companies, they got the functional mushrooms, they've got chai blends, warming spices, this, that, and the other. I think it just keeps the whole thing easier. It's like, when we get into sweetening it, for example, what do I sweeten it with? Or, what's going to work for people? So just keeping it real simple. On the tour side, I mean,
I was just going to interrupt real quick to tell you that.
Go ahead.
So we always teach, like, add sweetener to your cacao. It's very, 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 very bitter. But Julietta's dad drinks it straight. He drinks it black. He's a man's man. I don't know if you know a lot of those. I'm a maple syrup kind of girl, but
yep,
incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I'm around it all day long, so I'll snack on it straight. I like it that way, but I also have a sweet tooth, so I like the sweetening. But that's it's another example of, we could sell it at, say, like 70% with some kind of healthier sweetener, which is a little bit complicated on its own. But then it's, some people like it dark or not, and so it just seems way easier to do it in that form. So we're based in. Yeah. So we're based in Vermont, so we don't have any cacao trees to look at. It's a little too cold for us up here. So we have our shop. We're in Brattleboro, Vermont, southern Vermont, and it's a pretty small little space, about 1,700 square feet. And we get pallets of cacao beans in, and we run it through the whole process. The current space we're in, we've been in for almost 2 years. And one of the fun parts of that is we've actually had a lot more customers to start reaching out to come in and pick up cacao or check out the shop and see how it happens. Because there's a certain, I think, mystique around how, chocolate, how chocolate's made, like where does it come from? It's not like, like a banana or a coffee where it's like, hey, you've got the banana tree, they harvest the banana, I eat it. Here's coffee bean, they roast it, I grind it up. It's like, what does the tree look like? What does the fruit look like? What is, and then how do you get chocolate out of this thing? I think there's just that kind of Willy Wonka level of mystique around it all, which is kind of fun. So yeah, we love hosting people in the shop.
I'm going to say, so, because cacao will grow down here in South Florida where I am. And so a while back, I was gifted some cacao, and I watched a YouTube video, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to make my cacao. Let's just say that didn't go very well.
Yeah. So it's complicated.
There's no fear that I will stop buying Embue.
Yeah. It's pretty involved because it's, cacao is originally an understory jungle tree. So, it starts out like on the cacao farms, they mimic that shade condition. It's like heavily shaded at first, and then more and more sunlight as it gets bigger. And then the forest floor that's created by leaf drop of all sorts of plants creates the conditions for the midges that actually pollinate the tree. So then you need the conditions to actually pollinate properly. And then, 1 or 2 cacao pods is going to be a little bit challenging to work with in terms of like all the processing steps to get there. Like you need enough volume to ferment it well. And there's a butterfly museum near us that's, a climate controlled space, and they have a cacao tree there, and actually occasionally has cacao pods on it. So it's always fun to see because it's such a cool looking tree. Like the fruit actually grows right from the trunk or the branches. It's not hanging off in that way. So it's a really cool looking plant, but involved obviously to produce volume.
Can you talk a little bit about origins? We noticed that there's been some shifts and changes into where the cacao comes from and whatnot. Can you talk to us a little bit more about where it grows and what the differences are in those different origins?
Yeah. So cacao originally, the best guess right now is Peru, South America, Amazon. And it now grows in what people call the 2020 zone, so 20 degrees north and south of the equator. That's, the rough kind of limits of its growth conditions. It needs a lot of heat, a lot of humidity, a lot of rainfall. So obviously any climate that has those conditions, at this point, it's, obviously spread across the rest of South and Central America. It's in Africa. There's India, it's growing now, Vietnam. So even like in Southeast Asia, they're now growing it. And so in terms of origins, obviously there's lots of really interesting cacao from all over the world nowadays. Maybe 50 years ago, it was pretty much bulk of it coming from West Africa, low quality just in terms of both, conditions for workers, but the quality of the cacao itself also just blander essentially. There's no genetically modified cacao, but there are varietals that are more disease resistant, which is good for farmers that are, just bigger seeds, more yield, but the flavor is lost in the process, less interesting. And there's also been a revival of the art of fermentation, post-harvest processing in the last 20, 30 years. I think a lot, in large part due to the craft chocolate market, where there's just more people interested in single origin cacao, which is, you take a small area that's planting a somewhat similar varietals that they're dealing with. They've got the same terroir in terms of the soils, the climate. They ferment it together, and then we roast those as a single batch. And so what you get is you could compare origin to origin, and there's different flavor notes. Like right now we have one from Uganda called Semiliki Forest, and another one from the Dominican Republic called Reserva Zorzal. And just side by side with the same sweetness, there's all these interesting different notes in them. And there's other origins. I've tasted ones that have orange or blueberry, and the chocolate world gets into little hints of fig and tobacco, and it can get very, very in depth. And we don't go too far down that road because when people are making a drink, obviously a lot of the nuance gets lost, and I think most people overestimate our own ability to taste all these cool things in the cacao. But I find it fascinating that there is, one, there's a lot of good quality cacao out there these days, and two, just, being able to see the differences in the origins. And we, for us at Embue, the last year and a half has been pretty challenging in regards to origins because the cocoa market has been at this 60-year high where, if you look at a chart of just kind of international pricing, it's just kind of like going along, and it just hits this kind of cliff, and it just goes up really high, and it's softening a little bit, but the kind of rollover effect of that is some origins just get snapped up really quick because the big buyers come in and they're just looking for whatever they can get. On the flip side, sometimes quality declines because people can sell for such a good price. They don't bother fermenting. They're not taking as good care of the trees and the practices they have going on. Because they just don't need to, because there's such a shortage. So it's meant that we've danced around a little bit more with origins in the last 2 years than we had previously, to try and keep a good quality supply of cacao going and not have it be crazy expensive. Like some of the origins that we used to have came back online after not having crops, getting bought out, etc. And the price is double what we paid, or even 4 times what we paid a couple of years ago. And so it's origins are different, but I don't, I think if we made an offer of like, oh, here's what, this cacao at 35 a pound, and here's this other, and it's 55 a pound, it's a bit of a hard sell. So kind of, balancing the affordability and the kind of, volatility in, because we're in a much smaller, niche market with ceremonial cacao, much smaller buyer than a lot of the big companies. And so the kind of ways that hits us can be pretty random at times, of like when we need to buy, what's going on, when the prices kind of roll into the market. The big guys just kind of buy 50,000 tons or whatever it is, from wherever, of whatever quality it's, they're looking at a different picture than we are.
So I just want to say, Semaluki. Like,
yeah, I know you too.
I recently tried the Dominican one. I do have a lot of ties to the Dominican Republic. We hosted our first exchange student when I was in high school was from there, and our families have become super close. 40 years later, we're still in contact with them. And so when I saw that, I was like, okay, I have to give it a try. And of course, it's delicious and wonderful. But for whatever reason, the cacao from Uganda is just, it stole my heart. It's so delicious. And I don't know what my Egyptologist says. It's because, the water supply to that part of Africa in general is coming from the Nile River. Like, that's the primary source. And I have all these ancient Egypt connections. And so maybe it's that for me. I don't know. But if that goes away, I'm going to be very disappointed.
Yeah, it's fascinating, just the differences that people have in their preferences with the origins. I mean, some people are like, well, I really don't like that one, or I love that one, and it can, flip. And I've personally been really loving the Dominican Republic one lately, in part because it reminds me of a Guatemalan that we used to have. It's a little bit higher bitter. It's got more of the nuttiness instead of the fruitiness, and But I also notice, because I try a lot of different origins, it takes me a little bit to get used to a new origin. It's like, oh, that's a different flavor than I'm used to, and then it takes me a little bit to kind of get into enjoying the flavors with a new origin.
We've talked a lot, of kind of the more technical side of cacao, but I'm wondering if you have any tips for our audience on working with cacao from the spiritual side.
Yeah. I mean, my biggest recommendation is just to experiment with it. I mean, that's how I got started, is just doing a lot of working with cacao on my own in lots of different settings. And, that for me, that looked like, drinking the cacao and starting with the meditation. Then maybe I would try it out with like an ecstatic dance or more movement-based practice, trying it out with more therapeutic style inner processing work, kirtan, just straight quiet meditation. The thing I love about cacao is it's, there's not really any risk to it. So in a way, it leaves a lot of room for experimenting with, finding your own dose. That's a really important piece. Start around an ounce, maybe try an ounce and a half. 2 ounces is roughly the limit I would suggest. The more that people set up, as you were saying, Graciela, the intention, the space, cacao is I'd say like elastic or malleable in the, I could have cacao and just go about my regular day. It's obviously not psychedelic in that sense. I could drive my car, I could, go to work, whatever. But with a little bit higher of a dose and the right setting, a lot of magic can happen. And so the kind of set and setting of cacao, I think, is really important in how we set up the space, where we want to go with it, and being open to that, I think, will change a lot about what people experience. So finding ways to set the space up, acknowledge the cacao, and then be open. I think both of you have mentioned the kind of getting what we need from cacao part, which I find is very true also. And so being open to what comes, instead of like, I need to do this one piece of work that I think is so important. And then I'm kind of like, but I'm being nudged in this other direction, but I'm supposed to be doing the like meditation thing right now, or whatever it is. So I think it's good to follow that. Obviously at times, meditation practice can be challenging. So, sitting still for a while or sticking with something can have benefit, but also being flexible and going with what comes up. Because cacao for me is a lot about coming into deeper contact with the present moment. And sometimes you might not be aware of what's fully there. It could just be, a sadness, an anger, a grief. It could be some inspiration. There's a lot that it can help us unpack. And instead of looking for one particular thing, I think it's really helpful to be flexible and follow what's being presented. I've done deep inner processing. I've gotten creatively inspired, done, shamanic style journeying. So there's just so many different trajectories that I think it's great to play around with different practices, see how it pairs, see what's possible. Because a lot of people talk about cacao as a heart opener, which it is, but there's actually a lot of other aspects to it that, like when I do journey work, it's just way more vivid, and I feel much more in the journey than I do without cacao. When there's emotional processing work, it's easier to connect with the feelings without some of the judgments or stories that typically come with them, and make it harder to access those places. So there's a lot of directions that it could go. And I think it's helpful for people to be open to the directions it could go.
One of the things that I picked up from your course, which I took and launched all of this that you see here today, was that cacao always was consumed before any sort of important conversation or meeting or experience. And I just thought it was really, really cool, because I kind of wish like Congress would drink some cacao, and I wish our commissioners would drink some cacao, and what if schools drank cacao? And so, that got me thinking, like, even within families, so you mentioned you had 4 kids. I'm curious, do they consume cacao? How does cacao show up in your family? I have 6, they're now 16, so their bodies are kind of like adult bodies now. But also we're raging ADHDers in this household. And, I know for me, it helps me with focus and intention and things like that. Do you have an opinion or standards about children and how they can kind of experience cacao without, overstimulating their little bodies?
Yeah, it's really just about dose. It's totally safe for kids. I mean, my kids range from 3 to 13 at this point, and as young as 1, 2, 3, I'll let them have a sip or a little cup, or I just moderate the dose, based on body size, essentially, so that they don't get too much, but they get to have some. And sometimes at home we'll all drink together. Sometimes it's just my wife and I, but it's totally safe for kids. It's fun to do a little mini ceremony together, just as a family ritual practice. I've got a friend locally who runs a kids camp, and he actually started incorporating cacao ceremonies into the camp because he just wanted to bring that plant medicine piece in. And he said it's been really, really awesome. The parents will ask about it. And it's kind of a way to open that door into plant medicine where we're imbibing something, but it's, accessible, safe, etc.
That's awesome. I could just see it now, cacaoforkids.com. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely, Graciela and I host retreats, and cacao is always a part of our retreats. And, especially looking back at the last one, there was so much transformation happening at that retreat. And I know it would not have even remotely been the same if we had not had cacao as part of that retreat. And, I think sometimes too, because people are like, oh, it's not a psychedelic like psilocybin or ayahuasca or any of those medicines. But I just, want to put it out there that doesn't make it any less impactful. And I think both Graciela and I will say it's transformed our lives, and we've witnessed the transformation of so many other lives by people joining in and sharing cacao and allowing it to open their hearts. And so we definitely want to thank you for bringing this beautiful gift to all of us. Do you have any last thoughts that you want to share with our audience about cacao?
Yeah, just experiment, try it out in different ways, and don't be shy with it. I think one of you mentioned earlier, just cacao wants to be shared. It wants to bring its medicine, and so I think that's one of the great things about it, is how accessible it is for personal use. So just get started, give it a try, and be open to what happens.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your time with us. I am so, so, so excited for the future of cacao, our future, and open your doors, because we're definitely coming.
Sounds great. Look forward to it.
All right. If anybody needs support on their cacao journey out there, or needs help finding Embue, our favorite cacao, reach out. We'll have stuff in the show notes for you to see. And again, always reach out to us. We are happy to share our love of cacao with you. So with that, I wish everybody a magical day.